Hello and welcome. I'm Karen Campbell and I'm part of the Small Business Saturday team. A huge welcome to our panellists, Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, Shadow Chancellor Anneliese Dodds, Director of Small Business Saturday UK, Michelle Ovens, and our two wonderful small business owners. We have Craig Buttery from Rugged Outdoors and Kamaljit Suman from Art at the Heart. And a big welcome to you, our guests. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on a very grey Monday morning. So the first half of this event will be a discussion with the panellists, and in the second half we will open it up to ask your questions. Please can you submit the questions you asked when you signed up for this webinar in the Q&A box, and we will be bringing people on to ask their questions, so please be ready to turn your camera on and unmute yourself. For now we are going to have all the guests muted and cameras off. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer all your questions, but please do submit them as we really want to hear them. And panellists, if I could kindly ask you to keep your answers as brief as possible so we can get through as many questions as we can. So without further ado, I'd like to go to Keir. Lovely to see you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Since becoming Labour leader, you've talked about building a new partnership with business. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean there?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you to our panellists and to everybody on the call this morning. It's really fantastic to have this event ahead of Small Business Saturday coming up this Saturday. So it's really important opportunity, and we're very much looking forward to all of your questions throughout the next hour or so. And as Karen has already said, if there's any questions you've got that haven't been dealt with, put them in the Q&A box and we'll try to make sure that one way or the other we answer those questions. Karen, you're quite right. I've said that the Labour Party wants a new relationship, a new partnership with business, and that needs to be built on the idea that we work with business, that we don't do things to business, we work with business. And when I say business, Anneliese and I are really conscious of the fact that all businesses in a sense are different. There's large, small, medium size. We're talking about small businesses this morning, businesses that do different things. And I think one of the mistakes that many politicians make is say, well, I understand business. I even came from a business background. What I know, talking to businesses about Brexit, about COVID-19, about so many things in the last few years is, for every type of business, for every sector, for every size of business, there are different challenges. They're not all the same. And in order to understand those challenges, we have to talk to and engage with businesses of all sizes, of all shapes, doing all sorts of things. And when I say a new partnership, what I mean by that, what Anneliese and I mean by that, is a partnership between the Labour Party and business that sees the worth in business, sees business as a good end in itself that we need to work with, see them as the engine, if you like, of our economy going forward. And obviously, this conversation is a conversation that we, the Labour Party, will be having between now and the election of 2024. And we want to make sure that by the time we get to 2024, by whatever your political views, you feel that you've got a strong relationship with the Labour Party. You know how we think, you know how we operate, that you've had every opportunity to talk to us and us to you, and there's an ongoing dialogue. So it's important 4 years, so far as we're concerned. All the more so because of the challenges of COVID-19. And I know there will be many, many small businesses who have really struggled in the last few months. It's been incredibly difficult, obviously on the health front, but also on the economic front. And Anneliese has been calling throughout these months for better targeted, focused support for the businesses that really need it. But there's rarely going to be a business in the last 7 or 8 months that hasn't been going through a really, really hard time. And when we heard the Chancellor give the sort of outlook for the economy for the coming months and years, when he made his statement, his comprehensive spending review last year, I don't think there's anybody who didn't shudder at the figures that he gave out last week. So I know this is a period of great anxiety. Obviously, we've got Brexit on top of that, and still yet no deal, which will affect businesses across the whole of the United Kingdom. So we have this discussion in that context. And I think there's a real yearning after a pandemic like this that we can't go back to how things were before the pandemic. We need to imagine and fight for, envisage a better future with a stronger economy, and one that is more supportive of small businesses, which have struggled with so many challenges even before the pandemic. So Karen, that's what I mean by a partnership, an open dialogue, one in which we understand and respect each other, one in which we don't sort of see business as some separate sector. Businesses are where people work, they're where their families work, they're part of their communities. And so there isn't sort of the community and business as two separate entities. They're one and the same thing, and we want to build on a partnership that understands and recognises that and sees business as the engine room going forward. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. And, you know, community is what we're all about at Small Business Saturday. Anneliese, if I could go to you now, if that's okay. What does Labour want to see for small business? I know Keir's obviously echoed this just now. Between now and spring, would you say, from your point of view?
Well, thanks very much indeed, Karen, for that question. And I just want to repeat Keir's thanks really to everybody who's on this call. It's been an incredibly difficult time, particularly for small businesses. I think the challenges have been more intense very often for small businesses. I mean, it's more challenging in any case a lot of the time to conduct business. You know, you need to sort through, for example, the public health challenges, environmental health challenges, staffing challenges with fewer resources very often than larger businesses. And I'm very much aware of that. I mean, I come from a small business background myself, so I really want to pay tribute to all of you for what you've been doing, you know, both to make sure that you can operate safely, but also to look after your staff as well, which I know has been an enormous challenge a lot of the time. It certainly is going to be a very, very different Small Business Saturday, isn't it, this year? In terms of those immediate priorities, I mean, really, we want to see as much certainty as possible, particularly for small businesses right now. There's so much uncertainty caused by this disease. So we shouldn't see, for example, government adding to that. You know, you need to be able to plan as small businesses. So we don't want to see the furlough scheme tinkered with again in January. We want to have that clarity that it will stay the same, at least until March. We think that's really important. No change to the employer contribution in January just doesn't make sense. We want to see government looking again at the debt challenges that particularly small businesses are going to be facing. Obviously, lots and lots have had to take on debt during this crisis. Those chickens are going to be coming home to roost really from next spring. So we do want government to look again at, for example, the City UK proposals around recapitalisation. We need to be thinking creatively about this because small businesses are the engine of local economies a lot of the time. We want you to have confidence so that you'll be able to take additional people on. You'll be able to invest from next year. If you're carrying too much debt, that's not going to work. We do think government needs to look again at the situation for support as well, particularly in tier 3 areas. We've had a situation where, you know, a number of these support schemes, they've been drawn up at speed, but we know, especially in those areas that have got very tough restrictions, very large numbers of businesses just can't make ends meet, even with the local restrictions support grants that are available. So we do want government to look again at the additional support grants, see if there's a way that they could really make sure more of that was available, especially for those really hard hit areas. As Keir mentioned, we don't want to see more uncertainty coming about at the end of the year because of Brexit, whether a no deal Brexit or a very, very thin deal Brexit. So we've obviously been urging government to really engage very, very forcefully with those negotiations. We need to see political leadership there, particularly over last weekend. It's quite worrying for many of us. And then just finally, I think we're very aware that, as I said at the beginning, those public health challenges are particularly intense for a lot of small businesses. You know, if you have one member of staff who's got to go off because they've got to self-isolate, for example, that can really make the difference between your business being able to operate or not if they're not able to work from home. That means getting testing sorted out. That means getting all the system of support for those who are self-isolating. You know, if there isn't a sick pay regime already sorted out working. Also means, of course, making sure that vaccination will occur speedily and thoroughly so that you won't be in a situation where, for example, your staff haven't been able to be vaccinated, but especially if they've got customer-facing roles, so that we can speedily get out of this crisis. So that's our main call, really. It's about certainty and planning. That's what we want to see through to the spring.
Thank you, Anneliese. Fantastic. So over to Michelle now, who is the Director of Small Business Saturday, which is this Saturday, very excitingly. So in the build-up, what do you think, Mish, could be done to support small businesses at this difficult time? And I also want to ask you a bit about female business owners as well. And, what do you think we can do to encourage a lot more women to start their own businesses? We're seeing a lot already, I'm sure.
Two big questions, and I like that we just got in there. It's this Saturday, it is the 5th of December. To make sure we get the quick ad in every sentence, Small Business Saturday. Well, so I think a couple of things. One is when we talk about support for businesses, I think we need to make sure the conversation is broad enough. So support is not just about money, it's not just about getting out a loan, it's not just about getting a grant. It can be about what you spend that money on, but also it's got to be much broader than that. So managing your business in a crisis is very different to managing your business during business as usual. Oh, I did air quotes, I'm so sorry. It is a very different time, and most of us don't go into business with a massive background in running businesses, and certainly not running businesses in a crisis. And we go in with a skill or with a passion, and we need to make sure that businesses are supported with skills, really importantly, and particularly this year, as we've seen customers, workers shift massively to digital. We need to make sure there's a digital skills program as well to support small businesses. And I'd love small businesses, when they think about support, to think kind of much more broadly. Yes, we need finance, yes, we need help with staffing, and we've talked about the furlough scheme, but also how can we help small businesses run their businesses with more resilience? How can we help them get through this period? And I think there's a huge amount of help and support out there. It's quite a complex landscape, there's quite a lot of things going on, and I think the onus is on organisations like ours, and of course our leaders, to help businesses navigate that. And we've seen firsthand the difference it can really make to businesses, to getting that support, to getting that training. It can build your confidence as much as anything else, and get you going into 2021 with a bit more hope, a bit more spring in your step. So that's really important. And then I guess on your second question around female entrepreneurs, I mean, firstly, there's loads of them. They're amazing. So big up to the female entrepreneurs, definitely. One of the things actually that we've seen a lot, particularly through our F Entrepreneur campaign, is the importance of peer-to-peer networks, the importance of inspiration from people that look like you, that people who are doing similar things to you. And one of the things we've talked about a lot is the acknowledgement that businesses don't all look the same. And actually what we maybe term as a successful business might have changed over time. We're seeing more women starting businesses than ever before, and they might be doing it differently. They might have different goals. They might not be planning on scaling and get VC investment, but they do want to make a change to the world. They might want to impact the environment or change or change how employment is done. They might want to work flexibly. And so success is different things to different people. I think we have to be very careful not to tag people as lifestyle businesses, because, if you're working till 2 a.m, it's not a lifestyle business. So I think some of it is celebrating the variety of different kinds of businesses, recognizing that businesses don't all look the same. Great peer-to-peer networks to support female entrepreneurs, and also really great role models, and that's that's something that we do as a campaign, is raise up these stories, tell these stories. We see the most phenomenal small businesses led by women all the time. We have one here. Hello. Just phenomenal, and it's really inspiring. So we want to tell those stories more, and we'd like help with other people to tell those stories as well.
Fabulous. So, Keir, have you got anything to add here, or shall we go on to the small business?
Well, no, I was just really struck with what Michelle said at the beginning there, which is people coming in to set up businesses, etc. And it's the passion that drives them, and that will come in different shapes and forms. And a lot of the skills then picked up along the way, different challenges are thrown down, but that sense of the passion that actually drives people into business in the first place, I thought was fantastically captured by Michelle. So thank you for that, Michelle.
Fantastic, definitely. So we're going to move on to our lovely small business owners here. Kamaljit, I'd love to go to you first, if that's okay. So, you know, we're seeing so much agility, resilience in small businesses at the moment. You know, how can small businesses be agile at the moment and in face of the unpredictability of the current situation? Can you talk about a few of your experiences?
I was going to say, speaking from my own experience, we had to pivot incredibly quickly because basically everything, we're an arts organisation, all our workshops, classes, everything came to a complete standstill. And one of the things that helped us really was thinking creatively. So that's my first thing. We had to find a way to carry on helping our community, and we had to pick up digital skills very, very quickly. So mindset is another big thing. So we actually had to conquer our fear of being on video and just the whole, you know, this online communication with our children who are sometimes very young. We had to really just dive in at the deep end and swim. We didn't want to sink, so we had to swim. So what was brilliant was our community were really supportive. So I think the sort of fear of you know, failing, I suppose, is the thing really, and showing yourself up on video. We worked with our community through that. So it was the creative thinking, the sort of facing the fear, jumping in at the deep end, acquiring the digital skills. But throughout that, we had a lot of support. So we, sort of picking up on what Michelle was saying there, I was actually fortunate enough to be on the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator Programme. So we've had fantastic networking support, but also a lot of support just in terms of dealing with the risks and the uncertainty in modelling different scenarios. So we had a lot of business support as well as part of what we were doing. And then coming from an education background, we were really lucky, fortunate to be able to tap into the support that was available from universities just because we knew it was available. And I think that, so Aston University have helped us really substantially in sort of support. So the agility really came from being prepared to just have a go and working out the problems as we were going along and sort of just taking one day at a time, the resilience thing, and going with the flow a little bit, but sort of driving that change. To answer your question.
Fabulous, Kamaljit, and how inspiring, can I just say as well. Craig, lovely Craig in North Yorkshire, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about, you know, mental health and well-being, because I know you do a lot of work with people there. If you could talk a bit about that. And, you know, people are faced with a lot of economic uncertainty at the moment. You know, how do you think people are coping? What advice have you got and what have you seen?
Yeah, morning everybody, and first of all I want to say thanks to the SBS team for keeping me sane during the first lockdown. Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, mental health is such an important issue, and the way we tackle it around here is that we kind of try and persuade people to get out into nature. And as you know, we run a woodland activity centre. We've been going for 3 years now. And in the first 2 years, when we set the business up, we set it up for families to come down and enjoy themselves and get some quality time together. But what we found was that it was parents were dropping the kids off and saying, see you, we're going shopping. Come the lockdown and then the ease down, totally different altogether. All we're seeing now is families coming down. And there's absolutely nothing better to see parents bringing the kids down. You can see when they come to our gates, you can see how tense the parents are. And by the time they leave, the shoulders have relaxed, they feel 10 times better. In fact, they don't want to leave. We do 2-hour family sessions, and we've been going on for 3, 4, 5 hours. So people just don't want to leave. And I think it's a testament to what the outdoors can do for your mental health. I think that from a small business point of view, if we can't work in a manner what keeps us sane we're totally overwhelmed with everything, then it's difficult for us to run our businesses correctly. And I think just getting out, you don't need to go and pay thousands of pounds. You can go for a walk, take a pair of binoculars with you. There's so much wildlife out there that you can go and see. It's easy to do, and I think more and more people are understanding that, thankfully. And they are getting out there. I mean, we're seeing so many people. I mean, we're starting to get bookings for next year already. And some of it is the same families coming back. I mean, some families have been back 3 times because they see, what it's doing for them. And there's nothing better than seeing a mum and dad learning at the same time with the kids, and the kids kind of going, "Oh, Mum, Dad, did you not know that?" And sometimes the kids are beating them. We're doing firelighting. Generally, it's the kids that get the firelighting before the parents do. So, it's wonderful to see.
Oh, Craig, how fantastic. I've got a beautiful vision at the moment of everyone around a campfire. Thank you. We've got a bit of time before we go to the floor for the second half. So, Keir and Anneliese, have you got any comments on what these wonderful people have told us?
Well, Kamaljit, the 2 things that you said there that really caught my imagination were the adaptability, this incredible ability of businesses to adapt to the environment they're in, and almost whatever is thrown at them, and a lot has been thrown at them in the last few weeks and months. And we've heard amazing stories about businesses that have adapted their own workplace, the way they work, as you say, getting used to working with sort of videos and Zoom, things that this time last year we barely did at all. We are all doing all the time now, but actually adapting to making different things and doing different things. But also the second thing you said about the community links, which goes back to the point that I was trying to make at the beginning about not seeing business and communities as 2 separate things, but seeing them as overlapping things. So Kamaljit, that was really remarkable and inspiring. And then Craig, firstly, thank you for reminding us about the importance of mental health. I mean, it's always important. I think for years and decades, we have underestimated the mental health element of our lives, of our work, and we need to take much more care of that. I think that's been particularly acute during lockdown. It's really hard when you can't do the normal human things, when you can't see people. It is, and it's unexpected. And it is, during lockdown, it's very, very difficult. And I was really taken by your, just imagining families coming to the outdoors with you, because it is tricky. I mean, we've got 2 young children, and when you can't do the things that you normally do, trying to work out what you are going to do is difficult. And so I've got this, we'll have to bring our kids to your place and spend some hours with you. And I love the idea that the kids are ahead of you on all this. It's I could imagine that in the outdoors. It's already the same in our house. If we want to get the television on the right channel, we ask our 12-year-old because we can't work it out. And I can imagine that on the outdoors, it's exactly the same. So I'd love to come for that calming experience, perhaps after one of our more difficult meetings. We'll all head up as a sort of Labour Party front bench with our children. And I'd love to see those shoulders relax as we're all there. So this is really good. Thank you, Karen. It's a great session. Anneliese.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with all of that, obviously. I think also you've both, I would say, been very modest, actually, because the changes that you must have had to put in place at breakneck speed are really, really significant ones. I mean, I can imagine, Craig, thinking about I've got an outdoor centre in my constituency, and actually there was a lot of work initially to make sure that it was set up so that it could still be used safely. So that you didn't have too many people coming in at particular times and this causing problems. So a lot of work there. Clearly, Kamaljit, a lot of work as well to get your services operating effectively using a very, very different methods. And I think that analogy that you use, Kamaljit, is saying, well, you just had to dive in, just had to jump straight in and do it. And actually, that's a very stressful thing. It's not easy. And I think too often, sometimes there's been a presentation of the adaptations businesses have made as very, very simple, but actually they're really, really tough. I was talking to a business a couple of days ago that moved into doing takeaway. And if you've got staff who are used to just serving normally, and then suddenly you've got to set yourself up to doing takeaway, that is a big risk. It's a lot of work. It's very stressful, actually. So Thank you very much indeed. I have to say, Kamalja, I'm very pleased that you work with Aston as well, because I used to work for them too, and actually it'd be interesting, maybe we can get into this further in the discussion, also reflecting on what you said, Craig, about the support from SBS, about how we can do that linking up job, really, that I think Michelle talked about as well, how we can make sure that support is there, moral support actually a lot of the time, and support with signposting what support is there, as well as just the financial side, I think is really critical. So yeah, big thanks to both of you.
Thank you both. I'm very looking forward to the Labour Party toasting marshmallows around the campfire picture when that happens. Please distribute. Mish, you wanted to have a quick word about community, is that right?
Well, we all talked a bit about community and the importance of small business to community, and I think when we're talking about support, I do think that it's important, and I guess it's a big part of our messaging for this week, that we can all support small businesses. Actually, this is everyone. Small Business Saturday this year is not going to be one big event. It's going to be millions of tiny actions that we can all take and make a massive impact collectively. We can look at our high streets and be sad because they're not what they used to be, but then ask ourselves, when did we last go? When did we last go to that small business? You might be, oh no, that business shut down. Ask yourself, when did you last visit it? So kind of taking that collective responsibility as a community and saying, this is what we want, this is the place, this is the kind of place that we want to live. These are the businesses that we want to have around us. And actually maybe remembering back particularly to the first lockdown 1, Judgment Day, is the incredible role that small businesses played, how so many of them stepped up. They might have done deliveries to people who are shielding. They might have switched their business that our local pub started selling flour because you couldn't get it at the supermarket. These incredible things that businesses did to support us. So I think over the winter, I think the onus is on us as well to say, what kind of world do we want to live in? How amazing have small businesses been this year? And let's us take tiny actions and help support them through the winter.
Absolutely fantastic. So we're going to go to the floor now and ask some questions from our wonderful guests here. So first up, we've got Eve Broadis. Hi, Eve. Welcome. Are you unmuting and cameraing?
Hi, sorry.
Don't worry, we've all been there.
I know. I mean, I still can't get used to it. Never mind. Right. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your question, Eve?
I basically wanted to ask how you basically share the social value. Obviously, social value cannot be monetized, but as small businesses, as Michelle said, we're all passionate. But that doesn't always show up on the balance sheet, because obviously triple bottom line accounting doesn't actually measure financially social value. And as a fair trade business, that's something I really struggle with, because, you're trying to sell something, but you don't want to use the feel good factor or buy this because it, helps somebody in another country or whatever. So how do you promote businesses that are actually like small businesses on the high street? How do you promote that? Because you can't put it on a balance sheet. It's triple bottom line accounting, which you cannot monetize. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Yeah, of course it makes sense. Absolutely. And I would tell people, definitely tell people, don't hide your light under the bushel. I think one of the things that people really value about small businesses is that they are people, they're run by people, and they often have a fantastic social purpose. And I think that absolutely it's one of your greatest marketing assets is to tell people about the amazing stuff that you are doing. Now we have so many more ways to tell people. We can tell them on social media, we can tell them by email newsletter, we can we can tell by WhatsApp. There's loads of different ways that you can tell that story, and actually telling your small business story is incredibly valuable, and I think there's a huge appetite for it. I do think that the general public is really open to that and is really interested in that. So you can, although that's the values that you hold very dearly, it's also a really great sales asset for you, and I would tell the world.
Yeah, well, I do tell the world. I've been telling the world 35 years. I mean, I'm sort of been in the fair trade movement 35 years. So, Keir, I'm getting towards the end, Well, not I mean, yeah, I'm about to start the next 30 years. But, you know, I just really wanted, you know, what is your view on that? Because, you know, we live in a society which everything has to be monetized. You cannot monetize social value. So you have
Eve,
to face that.
I agree. And what Michelle said, I think is really, really important about business being about people, being about that social purpose and letting people know that. And I'd be interested, Eve, I mean, you said you've been doing it 35 years or another. My sense in the last few years is that people are much more interested now in what the purpose of a business is. That is a genuinely asked question now in a way that I'm not sure it was 10, 15 years ago. I appreciate it gets squeezed when times are hard because you know, if families are really struggling, then the cost of something becomes the completely dominant issue.
Yeah.
But I actually think in the last few years, people are much more interested. Where did this come from? How was it made? And I think, again, Michelle said this, that sense of the high street, because we all want the high street to be thriving. But that's a struggle. It's a real struggle when you've got chains that are, you know, possibly got, you know, retail parks just outside of towns now. It's really hard. So we need to encourage people and make the high street the place they want to go. It's an exciting place where they go and they do it because they want to. It's exciting. And they know they're supporting local businesses as part of the community. I genuinely think there's more of that now than there was 10 to 15 years ago. But interested in your view on that, Eve, because it's that ethos that we need to build on. Is that your sense?
Yeah, no, I think the problem is, I mean, it's a long story and, you know, I can't talk about it here, but it's something I'd like to talk about later on. But, you know, retail shops on the high street, of course, they're going to be more expensive, but because the products are doing, like I said, this social value. So there has to be more support from the top. I mean, looking at procurement, for instance, you know, I mean, you can bring it down to a local level. You know, why are we not using small businesses as part of the procurement process? I could be, honestly, Keir, I could go on for days. So, and Michelle knows that. But, you know, we need some support from the top. You know, we've got to get away from this, oh, yes, we're all doing good. You know, I mean, for me, fair trade has always sat in the charity sector. It's wrong. It might have started off in the charity sector, but it's a business. You know, we talk about high street stores and big high street stores. People are very reluctant sometimes to go into a little shop. I had one and I had to keep the door open because they're so used to going into shopping malls and big, you know, there's this thing about communication that a small shop is like, oh, you go in there, you've got to buy something. No, you haven't. You've got to come in and enjoy the experience. Let's get back to basics, you know. I'm a child of the 50s, you know. I mean, I love, you know, getting back to basics. Thank you, Craig. Well done. I saw a thumbs up there. You know, we need to get back to that, you know, don't reinvent the wheel. Let's go back to our roots, you know, because we've lost a lot on the way. And I'm really passionate. So I have to carry on.
Thank you, Eve, so much for your question and your contribution. Really appreciate it. Sorry, we've got to crack on. I've got a few questions. Next up, we have Sarah Ali Chowdhury. And please, if you've got a question, please do submit it in the Q&A for us as well. You know, we'll try and get you on and we'll make you live with Keir and Anneliese. Sarah, can you hear me? I feel like I'm Eurovision or something. Can you hear me, Sarah?
I can. Can you hear me? Oh, hi.
Hi, Sarah.
What's the question? I am wearing my Small Business Saturday t-shirt.
Fabulous.
Oh, very good.
Okay, so just a really quick one. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm obviously from a diverse background, as many entrepreneurs are at the moment, and I have been for many years. One of the I'm a chef from the Indian food industry, but I'm also being a female in business. There's so many, I think it's called, I'm one of those people that can tick all the boxes. I'm a mom of four, working in the Indian food industry and trying to pave the way for other women, female entrepreneurs in the food industry. There is a huge lack of Asian women in that arena. In fact, there's less than 1 in 5 chefs generally, and even less than that who, so if you go to an Indian restaurant, for example, you will always see men. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that the people who are running the associations for Indian restaurants, Bangladeshi restaurants, are all done by men. You will find that they are completely, almost 100% men. The women that you do see there are their wives who don't work. Well, lucky them. But for those of us who are working and who are single mums, and who want to have a business and pave the way for other women. We've noticed that during COVID, there's been loads of Indian restaurants or other restaurants, of course, many restaurants owned by women that have had to close down. I don't feel that there's been enough support financially for those. And I'm not talking about furlough or, you know, the other kind of funding that was available. But I'm talking about for diverse backgrounds. There are so many people who have language barriers. They might be, you know, who've come over from another country. They are entrepreneurial, they have brilliant ideas, and they have the ability to be able to start something that could make huge change for the economy. But they're not being given those opportunities because, number one, the people who are in charge of the money or the funding are all run by men who don't really think that women should be doing that. And so we'll keep them out of it. So really, my question is about funding for people from diverse backgrounds. I'm also part of the iEntrepreneur community, which Michelle has, you know, has given us a platform and an opportunity to highlight people from all different backgrounds and to give them an opportunity to get noticed and to be seen and to build their business and bring other people in as well. So I'm very proud of being a part of that. And I think without that, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you today. So first of all, thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Keir and Anneliese, for everything and everyone else here as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, who would like to answer?
Well, Sarah, I mean, I'll just jump straight in. I mean, it's pretty inspiring that you've got 4 children, you're running a business, and you've got all these thoughts. Absolutely incredible. And I think a lot of people, we got 250 people or so on this call this morning, I think will take great sort of heart from even hearing from you and the way that you put it this morning. On this question of funding, we asked Doreen Lawrence to do a review for us of the disproportionate impact of COVID on different communities, particularly the BAME community and different diverse communities. And of course, there was a disproportionate impact, but some of the things, there were findings in there that we didn't quite expect, but were really telling. So for example, I think it was about 48% of businesses with a sort of diverse background, particularly Black and Asian businesses, 48% weren't even applying for the schemes that they were entitled to because they didn't think they would get them. It was really striking. I mean, 48% is a huge, I mean, it's nearly half, not even accessing what they're perfectly well entitled to. And what Doreen thought was that what sat behind that was a sense that they probably wouldn't get it. So why waste their time going for it? So I think there's some really important stuff here that we need to dig out. What Doreen thought, and I think she's right about this, is that we need some sort of audit, equality audit of a lot of the policies that are in place, because a lot of them do apply across the piece, but actually the funding doesn't end up where it should, which may be that the funding isn't properly focused, but it may be the appetite of people to apply for it or their belief in the system is going to deliver for them. So I think there's a huge amount bound up in that. Anneliese, go over to you on that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that we're very concerned about indeed. Just as Keir said, we haven't seen any equality impact assessment of the different forms of support that have been available, and we would anticipate that it would illustrate exactly what Doreen reported in her review. I think there's a particular structural problem actually when it comes to the different lending schemes that have been set up, which is that very often female entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds, would be using alternative finance providers to the major banks, for example, but they weren't plugged into the system that was set up by the British Business Bank. It's taken a very long time for those alternative lenders to get signed up. In fact, we've still got a big gap in terms of which are able to, for example, disperse the bounce back loans. And of course, the deadline's coming up. I know it's been extended, but it's coming up now. So that really is a major problem, I think. We've got to recognise there's a big diversity of finance providers there, which actually are where the entrepreneurs are. And that's what then government should be backing with these different loan schemes. I would just say we also think that there is a big issue as well around data gathering with this. You know, some of those mechanisms have been suspended during this crisis. We want to see them being put back in place so we can really see what's going on in our communities and understand where that support is going and, you know, what the employment outcomes are. I think that's very important. But, you know, I'd obviously want to repeat Keir's tribute to you, really, Sarah. I mean, it sounds really inspiring what you've been doing, as well as the other entrepreneurs on the call.
Fantastic. And Michelle, you wanted to jump in quickly here as well.
Yeah, I mean, as Sarah said, we set up iEntrepreneur this year, which is to celebrate founders from diverse backgrounds and to give them a platform. And a big part, as I mentioned before, a big part of changing how we see business is storytelling, is sharing these incredibly inspiring, amazing businesses, these doing incredible things. But one of the things we've done this year is we've done quite a lot of had a lot of conversations. We've had lots of breakfasts and round tables and talking, partly as support, as Craig mentioned, is really to kind of make people feel like they're not alone during this difficult time, but also to ask people what they need. You know, what's missing? How do we move forward? And I think kind of acknowledging that we're still in the middle of this situation. There's a lot to come. There's a lot more support to come. And the two things, the two biggest challenges are communication and finance. And they're linked, of course, because getting the finance often requires the communication. But we have to think that it's easy to think that we say something through a big channel or mainstream media or maybe on Twitter, and it's going to reach the audiences that we want it to reach. And the chances are actually it's kind of reaching the people that you already talk to. So I think one of the things that we've really taken on board is taking the onus on ourselves and taking the responsibility to say, are we doing the right things to talk to the right people? Not are the people coming to us to get the information, but are we reaching out to them? Are we thinking about how people come together, how people communicate, what they're reading, where they're going to for help during this time, and then to address it from that respect. So take the responsibility on ourselves. I can see Kamalja's got her hand up, so I'm going to be quiet now, but I'll pass over.
Oh, Kamalja, just unmute.
Yourself, yeah. I'm just going to jump in very quickly, if I may, because our arts organisation, our mission is really to combat inequality through creative and cultural education. That's been our sort of core mission. My partner and I set up Art at the Heart 5 years ago, and we left almost 30 years in further education because we felt we could make a bigger impact by starting with really with younger kids, just because the immensity of the task at hand, we actually thought we're starting way too late at 16. This kind of work needs to start, you know, at age 3 at preschool and kind of work its way up. And everyone's already said lots of things. What I wanted to say was, as an Asian woman, a mom, entrepreneur, bit like Sarah, that we've, you know, the intersectionality of all the sort of barriers that we're up against, that I'm going to call it rejection fatigue. That's a real thing. We've experienced it ourselves. This is us. Both my partner and I have been educated in this country. We're both graduates. We've both been teaching for a long time, and we feel rejection fatigue. So that's just to make that point.
Thank you, Kamaljit. Sorry, we've got to move on. We just want to get another question if possible. Thanks, Sarah, for yours. Deborah Topping, can we have your question, please? Thank you.
Hello, yes. I left public sector after 34 years to set up a business and I deal with information law, so the dreaded GDPR, data protection, that everyone hates, but we have to do. I set up a new business and got to my first 12 months in March this year. Because of that, I didn't have 12 months of, I only had 12 months of accounts. And because I was still generating some income, I couldn't furlough. I'm a limited company, so size didn't apply. And there was no support whatsoever apart from take a loan out. But because I was a new business with 12 months, it was difficult. If you wanted a loan, you couldn't get it because you didn't have it. So I felt certainly at the start of the pandemic, very alone, very panicked. What was I going to do? And I had already been doing a lot of my training or testing some of my training virtually. So moved a lot of my straight away, everything went virtual, meetings, training, a lot. But I've learned now that going forward, a lot of the schemes going forward and the growth schemes, if you like, are only for those businesses that want to employ staff or want to grow their business. I'm like twilight of my career. I'm sort of looking forward to retirement in the not too distant future. I'm not looking to grow my business. I'm not looking to take on staff. I'm quite happy. I help small businesses and I help charities, because they really have a gap. But as soon as I said I wasn't willing to grow, the support was, they literally shut the conversation down. No mentoring schemes in my area, no support schemes. Find it yourself if you want, because I didn't want to grow my business. I just want to carry on delivering the service that I do to the small business and the charities, where they're at a cost-effective way for them, not looking to make massive profits or anything else. But I'm not one of those that took a massive dividend. I made £1,000 profit at the end of my first year, which was a profit in the first year, but that was the dividend. It wasn't the 50,000 that the government kept telling us all about. And I'm not likely to be taken anywhere near that this year. So it's just the lack of support and the lack of going forward. It's that awareness that businesses who are quite happy being sole proprietors, sole businesses, but there needs to be a support program or something there. And I wondered how, Keir and Anneliese, how you would envisage that sort of support program for those businesses like mine. There's tiny businesses that just happy to carry on as we are really, but just maybe need that bit of mentoring or that bit of business support.
I think Anneliese will come in on this because she's been very concerned about those businesses that have fallen through the cracks, if you like, of the schemes that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly the situation you're talking about, Deborah, of being really a micro business. I mean, it's just you delivering those services, particularly for limited companies. It's been extremely difficult. And I think the situation you described, it's not an uncommon one. I think the representation that's often been given of these kinds of companies is that they pay an enormous dividend. These are people who are very wealthy, who don't need to have that support. That really isn't the reality for very large numbers. I think from our point of view, there are two core things that we want to see done in the short term. We want to get beyond the kind of computer says no mentality. I'm sorry if that's a bit kind of denigrated. I don't mean it to be, but actually, we've had long enough to fix particularly the self-employed scheme, I would argue, and make sure that the scope is broadened so that it covers a larger range of businesses. That hasn't happened, unfortunately. And I think it's then being compounded by the fact that you and many others, if you were in a situation where, for example, you needed to claim social security to keep your head above water, you'd very quickly be knocked out of that because you'd have that money kept back to pay tax and have the kind of facility to pay yourself sick pay and all this kind of thing if you needed to, if you were unwell. All that responsibility is on you as the director. So they're the short-term things that we want to see sorted out. We think it's very, very important. But I would say that's then linked to the longer term, because actually so often businesses like yours, I think, Deborah, they do fulfill that niche. They're delivering a very specialised service that actually, some of the larger companies might not necessarily be very interested in delivering. You're making sure that those charities, etc., with lower margins, that they get a really good quality service. So we need to make sure that your concerns are taken into account at the beginning of planning different programs and legislation, that you're not an afterthought, that you're actually thought about from the beginning. And I would say that applies to a lot of diverse company forms, very often with cooperatives as well, similar problems, they're kind of forgotten about until the end. And then there's a realization, we'll need to make it easier for them, just like, we'll need to make it easier for micro businesses. We need to recognize actually these businesses are a big part of UK business from the beginning. So they shouldn't be that afterthought, they should be thought about from the start.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anneliese. Thank you, Deborah, for your very important question there. So we've got maybe time for one more question. It's going very quick. So we've got Owen Davis, who's joining us now. Hello, Owen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can. What's your question?
Owen, we can. We can't see you yet, but we can hear you.
Let me turn the video on. Thank you. Okay.
There you go.
Hi, we've got you.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. So my question was really specifically about the hospitality sector and what additional support could be provided to small businesses up and down the land who are struggling because of the going in and out of lockdowns, which makes it very impossible to plan. In fact, my business in the UK won't really benefit because we're service providers to the hospitality sector. So, it's very difficult for us to benefit. But I do feel for these small B&Bs and small hotels and pubs, really. And of course, they're such large employers, and the trend has been a decline in pubs over the years, as you know, over the recent times. And in a sense, we're going to see a very sharp contraction now, it seems to me. And is that what we want? And is there a way of avoiding that?
No, it's not what we want, Owen. And thank you for raising that, because the hospitality sector has been through a really, really difficult set of months. Obviously, there's the restrictions themselves, which mean that people can't come in, or they're shut down, or they can't operate in an ordinary way. There's then the frustration. I think many businesses in hospitality have spoken to Anneliese and me about, having spent money putting in different ways of working, screens, tables, adapting, which costs money, often putting in outdoor space, only then for the rules to change again. So a lot of pubs were explaining to me last week that the benefit they got from the arrangements they put in their outdoor space, they only had for about a week or two before the rules changed again, and they'd invested thousands of pounds in that. There was a deep sense of frustration as well, that and a sense that those making decisions haven't actually been in a pub recently, because most of the well-run pubs had adapted, as you know, to signing in when you arrive with an app, being taken to your table usually with a mask, table service only, actually very secure sets of arrangements. So a real frustration about that. And then, Owen, as you rightly say, it's not just the pubs and the hospitality themselves, it's all those that provide into it, which weren't provided for as well, where you had perhaps a pub that was closed down, and where you're forced to close down, there was particular support. But then what about the people who are supplying to that, who may not be closed down, but half of their work or half of their supplies are going to a pub which isn't operating, therefore they can only operate at 50%, 25%, or something like that. A real cause for concern. And there's an underlying thing here that's really important, Owen, and Anneliese was pressing the government really hard on this in the autumn, because just before the second furlough scheme, the government's argument was, well, if you're not up and running in October, then you're probably not viable and you better look for another job. I find that really completely the wrong approach, because hospitality isn't a dying sector that, unfortunately we're moving away from, as we have seen in other parts of business or industry. Coal mining is an example of that, where something gets to the end of its natural life. Hospitality is not in that space. It's just unable to operate at the moment under the current restrictions. But we want a thriving hospitality sector going forward, and we need to bridge to that point, rather than say to people in hospitality, well, go and train as something else. I thought that was really, lacking any sensitivity from the government. The idea that hospitality isn't viable just because it can't operate at the moment because the government's imposed restrictions. Restrictions we support. We're not saying the government's wrong in trying to protect all of us from the health implications of COVID, but understand and support the sectors that need it most, and understand exactly how they have adapted. I'll pass over to Anneliese, because she's been pushing really hard on this. But Owen, I think a number of points you make there are critically important. I think too, the way the government just hasn't quite seen this properly and understood the sector properly, and is making mistakes which are going to cost businesses and are going to cost jobs with it. And I'm really, really concerned about that. Anneliese.
Yeah, I think Keir's absolutely right. It's really important that policymakers are thinking about this with the mindset of, for example, a publican and what they've got to do over the weeks coming up. We had one situation just before the second lockdown, as Keir mentioned, where actually it wasn't clear. And I heard from one, in fact, it was a restaurateur rather than a publican, but they were saying that we don't know whether next week we're going to be able to keep our staff on at all, whether our staff alternatively are going to be paid at 67%, whether they're going to be paid at 73%, whether they would be furloughed as before at 80%. Now, it's hard enough running a small business, but when you've got so little certainty around the really basic parameters, that just makes it far worse. So we do think we've got this period now when we can see there's light at the end of the tunnel, thank goodness, with the vaccine. Of course, we've got to make sure that it's delivered effectively as speedily as possible. But that means we must do what we can to try and preserve those businesses, keep them with their employees in place. So that means continuing with the furlough scheme as it is now, not fiddling about with it in January, because that will just cause more uncertainty, we think. So keep it as it is until March. Let's also make sure that that additional support grant that was initially in place for the tier 3 areas, that we really have that there for those areas where, you know, it's not possible for any hospitality venues to operate aside from via takeaway. We do think that additional support needs to be there. Let's make sure that the public health backing is also there, because actually in many other countries you saw over the summer more of a return, I would say, back into venues, because there was more confidence that test, trace and isolate would work effectively, for example. And then I really think into the longer term, we need to be really proud, I think, of our hospitality sector. I mean, you're right, Owen, when we look at pubs, there has been decline. I think that's because of many structural and market issues that haven't been gripped hold of firmly enough, and they need to be. But overall, hospitality and tourism, they were growing as a sector of the UK economy, as were, for example, creative industries. And yet we had that situation where, as Keir said, some would say, well, actually, long-term viability is in question. Well, it cannot be, because they're absolutely critical to our country's economic future. So I think we need to have that pride. We need to really showcase those industries and try and provide them with the confidence, because they're so important for employment and for our economic future.
Thank you, Anneliese. I'd quickly like to bring Craig in if possible, because there's a lot of nodding going on there, Craig. Can we just have a few comments from you really quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we were one of those businesses that fell through the cracks. I mean, we had a double whammy. We had 5 floods between November and February, which totally wiped us out. I mean, we lost everything. Then came the lockdown, which meant we couldn't get into our bit of woodland to then get it back to a working environment. Thankfully, when it eased, we had a week to get ready, and we were working 17, 18-hour days, 7 days a week to get it put right. And I just think that something needs to be done now to give support to those businesses that have fallen through the cracks. I mean, we're in our business plan, we were looking at doing craft as well as the bushcraft that we do, because we can't survive on bushcraft alone. If we'd have been able to tap in some of that money, we could have done that now and been servicing people for the Christmas period, which would have tided us over beautifully. Unfortunately, we can't do that. I mean, we're having to literally pull pennies together to try and buy the equipment that we need. So something needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. I mean, I know of businesses, I've talked to people who got the £10,000 grant and it's still stuck in their bank account. They've never used it and didn't need it, but they took it because it was there, and that's so wrong.
Yeah.
So it's something definitely needs to be done.
Thank you, Craig. We've only got a minute left, unfortunately. Keir, Anneliese, can I just go to you for a quick final last words? And thank you so much for all your questions. We will get through them.
Yeah, Karen, just very briefly from me. I mean, the range of questions and views and issues we've got through, I think just tells its own story in terms of the diversity, the different types of business, the things that people are doing. And what's come through this morning is a real sense of energy and passion. People sharing their issues, the challenges, but nobody saying, look, I can't do it, we're not going to make it. People really, what's the way through this? Where's the passion for that? I just want to say thanks to everybody on the call. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks to our panelists. That's been really good to be part of this panel. Don't underestimate how useful this is for Anneliese and me, because when we have exchanges like this, we hear, we listen, we take that away and we think about that in terms of how we use what we've learned in the last hour in the policies that we make, in the challenges we put to the government, and how we support some of the issues you've raised, because by talking about them and understanding them, we're in a better position to support you than if we hadn't done it. And there's no substitute for events like this. You can't do this by reading a briefing paper. You have to talk to real people in real businesses to get a real sense of what the challenges are. Anneliese.
Well, absolutely. And I think this has just shown us that human side of business, which you all know about, but which so often is forgotten about, I would say, at the policy level, and the real challenges that you face. I mean, this is an emotional time, you know, for a lot of businesses, very, very difficult one. I want to thank you all for what you've done. I really strongly agreed with what Michelle said around the contribution of small businesses at this time to this, you know, incredible national crisis that we're in. You've been absolutely amazing from that point of view. And I guess I just want to say, I really hope Small Business Saturday goes well. We're obviously strong supporters of it, but this will sound very cheesy, but you know, every Saturday should be one when people are thinking about their small businesses and how they can support them. You know, so important for employment, so important for innovation as well, and so important for our economic future. So big, big thanks from us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Craig, Kamaljit, amazing. I'm just going to hand over to Mish for a quick final last word. And thank you, Keir and Anneliese, amazing. Thanks for taking
Thank you.
I'm just echoing Karen to say a massive thank you. Thank you so much for your support, Keir and Anneliese. It's just amazing. It's been super interesting today. And of course, to you and to everybody watching Small Business Saturday on Saturday, you don't have to support on Saturday. You can support on Friday. Do it safely. Find a small business. You can do it online. You can do it in person. Wear a mask, keep your distance, wash your hands. But do support a small business this week. And of course, all the way through the winter.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Michelle.
everyone. Take care. Have lovely days.